So what we find out in the notes is we can move any graph left, right, up, or down. It doesn't have to be one of the four that we started with. But we noticed a pattern in those four graphs. And they're telling us here is the graph of y equals g of x. So they've written it in function notation. In fact, when we look at that red graph, that's not a graph that you know an equation of. It's not a parabola. It's not a square root. It actually looks like just a bunch of lines stuck together. Sketch the image graph. So there's some terminology in here. Image graph is the graph you get after you do something. And then it says write the graph in terms of the function g. This is going to be important because when you watch a math teacher do math, you're not always listening to the instructions. You're looking for patterns on how I do something and saying to yourself, could I do that again? And then you say, oh, I think I could do that again. This doesn't look too hard, right? Could you move this graph 4 units up? You'd be like, yeah, Mr. JR, things are pretty good so far. Sorry, 4 units to the left. Take this point, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Connect my dots. Perfect. I moved it 4 to the left. That wasn't so bad. But the green part that I highlighted for part A, it says, write the equation of the image graph in terms of the function g. So we want an equation. Okay? This word causes students problems. An equation has an equal sign. And an equation has something on both sides of that equal sign. So if I want to write an equation for this function, y equals, and I need it in terms of the function g. That means that we need to have on the right-hand side of our equation the function g somewhere. It's not just equal to g of x, though, because g of x is the red graph. So the red graph is written in terms of g. But now, what have we done? We've moved it 4 to the left. How do we show moving something 4 to the left? Well, that happens inside the function. I'm going to have a 4. Am I going to have a plus sign in there or a negative sign in there? 4 to the left. Again, it's the opposite sign. So you're going to have y equals g of x plus 4. Last sentence says, state the domain and range of each function. So for our blue function, the domain is our x values. It starts from -5 and goes up to 2. So 2 ways that you can write that. Whenever the domain is between 2 values, we always start with our smallest value. And we can say that x is greater than or equal to -5, but less than or equal to 2. In other words, x is between -5 and 2. That's in set notation. In interval notation, smallest value is -2. Our biggest value is 2. And they're included, so we use square brackets. For the range of our blue graph, our smallest y value is 2. Our largest y value is 5. Or you could write it in interval notation. So if a question on the exam says, can you give me the domain? You can choose either notation. You do not have to do both of them. You can choose either one. You do need to know both because if a question, a multiple choice question, gives you the domain in set notation, you have to know what it means. If it gives it to you in interval notation, you have to know what it means. So we'll write it out in both forms. And then after a while, I'll sort of switch back and forth. So I'm not doing both ones every single time, but just all throughout the year, you go back and forth between different notations just so that you get to know it well. And part B, it says, can you translate it 1 unit up? So I'm going to switch colors here. I can move this point 1 up, this point 1 up, this point 1 up, this point 1 up. Connect the dots. The equation of the green one, so part B, in terms of G. Well, this time we've had a translation 1 unit up. That happens outside of our function. So you get g of x plus 1. The domain of g of x, well, the smallest x value is -1. The largest x value is 6. And the range, the smallest y value is 3. The largest y value is 6. And after we've done a question, and we've answered everything that we've needed to answer about this, and we've paid attention to some of the key things in the question that are going to throw you off on a test. Because on a test, if you say, what does it mean in terms of the function g, I can't help you at that point, right? This is where we have to pay attention, right? One of the biggest things you can do to study during the course of the year is pay attention in class and make mental notes of what's important while you're in class. So when we take things like, what does it mean in terms of the function g, you take a moment to think about that and say, how am I going to remember that? And make some sort of decision how you're going to remember that, because that's going to help you when that comes up on a test. Again, if you just copy everything down in class as I say it, then when you get to those tests and quizzes, you're going to say, I don't remember what this means, and then that will cause you a problem at that point. So we want to make sure that we're paying attention to those details. And then once we're done a question like this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you in the homework right now, you can do questions 5, 6, and 7. After doing this example, you should be able to do questions 4, 5, 6, and 7. And I'll usually give you somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes to work on those, so that if you have questions already, or if you're unsure about domain or range or something from the question that you didn't quite know, you can ask those questions now rather than not knowing all class. So we'll take 5 minutes right now. And so question 4, 5, 6, and 7, well, if you just turn, the questions are at the end of the lesson. So question 4 starts on page 169. The other nice thing about this textbook is if you want to check your answers, you don't have to flip all the way to the back. The answers are just at the end of the questions on page 176.